beacon of the Bluffs, the history, tragedy, and hauntings of Block Island Lighthouse. Block Island, a rocky outcrop off the coast of Rhode Island, is home to one of New England's most enigmatic and storied lighthouses. The Block Island Lighthouse, particularly the North Light, has long stood as a silent guardian against the perils of the Atlantic Ocean. It has seen shipwrecks, violent storms, tragic deaths, and eerie tales that refuse to fade. Located approximately 13 miles south of mainland Rhode Island and east of Montauk Point, Block Island lies squarely in the path of major shipping lanes that service the Atlantic coast. Its position, while visually stunning with high clay bluffs and rolling hills, made it a maritime hazard for early seafarers. Treacherous shoals, unpredictable tides, and frequent fogs plagued mariners, leading to many accidents before the erection of a proper lighthouse. The need for a guiding light was not a luxury, but a pressing necessity. By the early 19th century, Block Island had already gained a grim reputation among mariners. The waters surrounding the island were infamous for claiming vessels, especially near Sandy Point and the northern tip. Public outcry intensified following multiple high-profile shipwrecks in the 1820s. Local newspapers documented not only the loss of cargo, but also dozens of lives. The U.S. lighthouse establishment responded in 1829 by constructing the first lighthouse on Block Island, a simple structure that would eventually be overshadowed by the need for a more effective beacon. The first lighthouse was a 35-foot tower constructed near Sandy Point with an attached keeper's dwelling. Built from rubble stone, it served its purpose initially, but was soon criticized for its dim oil lantern and poor placement. Erosion, lack of visibility, and outdated lighting technology rendered the 1829 lighthouse insufficient. As shipping traffic increased and technology improved, calls for a new lighthouse grew louder. In 1867, the federal government approved the construction of the current Block Island North Light. Located at Sandy Point, it was constructed with durable brown granite from westerly Rhode Island. The tower stood 55 feet tall and utilized a fourth-order Fresnel lens, capable of projecting its beam nearly 15 miles into the Atlantic. The architecture was a blend of function and Gothic-inspired aesthetics, with a mansard-roofed keeper's house integrated into the structure. This lighthouse would become the centerpiece of Block Island's maritime identity. The waters surrounding Block Island have earned a notorious reputation over the centuries as a graveyard for ships. Known for its rocky shoreline, shifting sandbars, and unpredictable fog, the island has played host to an alarming number of maritime disasters. Long before radar and GPS, even seasoned captains feared these treacherous waters, and many a voyage ended in tragedy just within sight of the shore. The lighthouse was built in response to this danger, but its presence did not eliminate catastrophe altogether, particularly in the early years when even the most powerful Fresnel lens could be obscured by thick fog or blinding nor'easters. One of the earliest recorded shipwrecks off Block Island occurred in the 1700s, with the legend of the Palatine, a German immigrant vessel that ran aground under mysterious circumstances. Though often told as folklore, the story has enough historical basis to be accepted as partially true by maritime historians. The Palatine allegedly caught fire and drifted offshore, her passengers either dead or already drowned, with islanders reportedly witnessing the flames from land. To this day, some claim to see the burning ghost ship during stormy winter nights. By the 19th century, maritime traffic around Block Island had increased significantly, and so too did the number of wrecks. The area near Sandy Point became a particular hotspot for disaster, where underwater rocks and strong currents created a deadly funnel. One such tragedy was the wreck of the Queen City, a coal schooner that sank in 1888. Caught in a gale, the ship was pushed toward the northern coast and broke apart just beyond the reach of rescue. Several crew members drowned while trying to swim ashore through the frigid surf, weighed down by soaked clothing and cargo debris. Another major disaster was the Louis IV Place, a three-masted schooner that met its end in 1902. En route from New York to Providence with a full load of lumber, the vessel encountered a sudden snowstorm and lost all sense of navigation. The lighthouse beam was obscured by the storm, and the ship slammed into the rocks just north of the island. Island residents and lighthouse staff attempted a heroic rescue, using ropes and pulleys in zero visibility to save the crew. Sadly, several perished before help could arrive. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, it is estimated that over 50 ships wrecked in the waters surrounding Block Island. Some left no survivors. The cold Atlantic often claimed bodies that were never recovered. Islanders speak of unmarked graves scattered along the bluff's edge, hastily dug for unknown sailors who washed ashore, faces mangled by sea and stone. These wrecks were not just tragic, they were personal. Block Island families often took in survivors, buried the dead, and carried the weight of each loss. For lighthouse keepers, each shipwreck marked a failure. Despite their best efforts, the sea had won again. The echoes of these tragedies still seem to whisper across the dunes, adding another layer of mystery and mourning to the island's rugged beauty. Among the many shipwrecks that haunt the maritime history of Block Island, the wreck of the Mary Elizabeth in 1870 stands out not only for its tragic toll, but also for the enduring legends it inspired. A passenger steamer of modest size, the Mary Elizabeth was making a routine voyage from Boston to New York when it encountered a sudden winter storm just east of Block Island. Although equipped with the navigational tools of the era, the crew was unprepared for the ferocity of the storm that descended on the region on the night of January 14th. By all accounts, the seas that night were brutal, churning with 20-foot waves and lashing winds that approached hurricane strength. Dense fog rolled in unexpectedly, further reducing visibility and making it nearly impossible for the ship's crew to fix their position. The captain, believing they were safely offshore, pressed onward, unaware that they had veered dangerously close to the northern tip of Block Island. Some survivor accounts claim they caught fleeting glimpses of the North Lights beam before the ship struck a submerged ledge near Sandy Point. The impact was devastating. The hull of the Mary Elizabeth was torn open, and icy seawater flooded the lower decks. Within minutes, panic erupted among passengers and crew. With lifeboats nearly impossible to launch due to the crashing waves, most aboard were left to cling to the ship or debris in the freezing Atlantic. Out of the nearly 60 passengers and crew members, only 36 survived. The rest were either swept away by the surf or succumbed to hypothermia in the frigid water. The lighthouse keeper on duty that night, William Travis, later described the harrowing scene. Awakened by the cries of shipwreck victims and the thundering sound of breaking wood, he and his assistant rushed to the shoreline with lanterns and ropes. Using makeshift life-saving techniques, they were able to pull several survivors from the water. The next morning, the beach was strewn with wreckage and bodies. Among the dead were women and children, their lifeless forms wrapped in seaweed and battered by the rocks. Travis recorded the event in his logbook, noting grimly, "God help us, there was nothing more we could do." The unidentified body of a young woman was found partially buried in the sand several days later. Described as wearing a white dress and a gold locket, she was never claimed and was buried in an unmarked grave by islanders. Locals soon began reporting ghostly sightings of a pale woman walking along Sandy Point, believed by many to be the spirit of the unidentified victim. The tragedy of the Mary Elizabeth was widely reported in newspapers throughout New England, and public outrage contributed to increased pressure on maritime authorities to improve safety measures, such as better fog signaling and more accurate nautical charts. The event also solidified Block Island's deadly reputation among sailors and inspired generations of ghost stories that linger to this day. The romanticized image of a lighthouse keeper, solitary, stoic, ever vigilant, is only one side of a much darker reality. At Block Island's North Light, isolation wasn't just a challenge, it was an oppressive presence that tested the mental fortitude of every man stationed there. While the lighthouse served to guide mariners and prevent death at sea, its very nature often exacted a toll on those who maintained its light. For many keepers, particularly in the 19th and early 20th centuries, the unrelenting solitude, the remoteness of the location, and the psychological burden of responsibility led to anxiety, paranoia, breakdowns, and even death. The North Light's location at Sandy Point placed it far from the island's main village. During the harsh New England winters, snowdrifts could pile high against the doors, and the freezing wind off the Atlantic would howl for days, sometimes weeks, without reprieve. Cut off from communication and companionship, keepers endured long stretches without seeing another soul. Mail and supply deliveries were irregular, and during storms, non-existent. For those who served without family, the only company was the endless crashing of waves and the ticking of the lighthouse's mechanical clock. One of the most tragic examples of isolation's impact was the 1903 death of assistant keeper Franklin Todd. Described by his contemporaries as a quiet and introspective man, Todd began exhibiting signs of distress in his journal entries. His handwriting became increasingly erratic, and his notes reflected paranoia. He believed someone, or something, was whispering to him through the walls of the keeper's house and calling from the dunes at night. On March 4th, 1903, after several days of stormy weather that had trapped the crew inside the station, Todd was found dead in the boathouse by the head keeper. He had hanged himself from a beam using a section of rope used for fog bell maintenance. His last journal entry simply read, "She calls from the tide. I must go." Despite the tragic circumstances, the Lighthouse Board ruled his death a suicide due to mental instability brought on by prolonged exposure to isolating duty. Local law, however, took a different view. Some islanders believed Todd was lured to his death by supernatural forces, perhaps the same spirit linked to the Mary Elizabeth wreck, or another lingering presence from one of the many unmarked graves nearby. Others claimed that future keepers heard footsteps in the boathouse, or felt a sudden coldness when passing the place where Todd died. Todd was not the only keeper to suffer mental health struggles. Records show that at least 3 other men stationed at the North Light requested transfers citing emotional strain, hallucinations, or unbearable loneliness. One keeper reportedly fled the island entirely during a foggy night in 1911, leaving the light unattended for nearly 12 hours, a dereliction that resulted in his dismissal, though some claimed he never mentally recovered from his time at the post. The North Light may have guided countless sailors to safety, but it came at a cost. For those stationed at the edge of the known world, keeping the light burning often meant battling unseen shadows, both outside and within. Among the many ghost stories that drift through the foggy lore of Block Island, none is as enduring or emotionally haunting as the tale of the Lady in White. This spectral figure, said to roam the windswept dunes near the North Light, has become a central character in the island's paranormal folklore. Witnesses describe her as a pale, sorrowful woman, dressed in a flowing white gown, often barefoot, sometimes weeping, and always vanishing before anyone can get close. The origins of the Lady in White are murky, but one legend ties her to the 1870 wreck of the Mary Elizabeth. According to the tale, she was a young woman named Eleanor Hartley, newly engaged and traveling to New York to reunite with her fiancé, a merchant seaman awaiting her arrival. When the Mary Elizabeth struck the rocks near Sandy Point and began to sink, Eleanor is believed to have been one of the passengers swept out to sea. Her body was never recovered, though several survivors claimed to have seen her clinging to a piece of wreckage before being lost in the darkness. In the weeks following the disaster, lighthouse keepers reported seeing a white figure wandering along the shoreline at dusk. At first, they assumed it was a survivor in shock, or perhaps a local mourner visiting the site. But when attempts were made to approach her, the figure would vanish, sometimes in the blink of an eye, sometimes fading slowly like mist dissolving into the wind. The first documented account comes from keeper William Travis, who noted in his log in February 1870, "A woman in white was seen at the surf's edge. When we called out, she did not reply. We approached, and she vanished into the fog." Over the decades, sightings of the lady in white became more frequent. Tourists, islanders, and even hardened fishermen have claimed to see her near the lighthouse or drifting just above the waves, her face often obscured by long wet hair. Some report hearing soft sobbing or the faint rustle of skirts even when the air is still. One particularly chilling encounter occurred in the summer of 1922 when a local boy swore he saw her standing at the base of the lighthouse, her hand resting on the granite wall. When his mother came to look, there was no one there, but a small puddle of seawater remained where the figure had stood, though it hadn't rained in days. Skeptics argue that the lady in white is merely a product of myth, born of Block Island's stormy past and romanticized tragedies, yet those who have encountered her say otherwise. In 1982, a photograph taken by a visitor on a foggy afternoon showed what appeared to be a translucent female figure standing behind the lantern room glass. The lighthouse was locked and empty at the time. Whether a grieving spirit, a psychological projection, or a trick of the light, the lady in white continues to enchant and unsettle those drawn to Block Island's windswept northern coast. She remains a reminder that some souls, perhaps, never find their way home, even with the beacon burning bright. Longtime islanders have spoken for generations of a ghost ship that sails near the North Light during heavy fog. Described as a three-masted brig with glowing sails, the ship is said to silently glide across the water before vanishing into mist. Sailors have reported its appearance as an omen of death or severe weather. In 1931, keeper Walter Evans claimed to see the ship during a thunderstorm. That night, a local fishing boat capsized, killing 3 crew members. Skeptics say it's an optical illusion, but believers are not so easily swayed. Modern visitors and staff at the restored North Light report a variety of eerie occurrences. These include sudden drops in temperature in the lantern room, doors slamming without wind, footsteps in the hall when no one is present, an antique clock that runs backwards during the equinox. Former volunteer docents have described being touched or whispered to when alone in the building. Paranormal investigators have recorded electronic voice phenomena of a woman sobbing and a voice repeatedly saying, "Not safe." Several groups, including the Atlantic Paranormal Society, have visited the Block Island Lighthouse. Their equipment recorded anomalous electromagnetic readings, unexplained cold spots, and an infrared image of a figure standing at the top of the tower when it was supposed to be empty. Local ghost tours now incorporate the lighthouse into their nighttime events, and it is considered one of Rhode Island's most haunted locations. By the late 20th century, the lighthouse was under threat from shoreline erosion. In 1993, the entire structure was carefully relocated 300 feet inland, a massive engineering feat that cost nearly $2 million. During the relocation process, workers reported finding bones buried near the base, believed to be the remains of early shipwreck victims. The discovery fueled renewed interest in the supernatural lore of the area. Today, the lighthouse is operated as a museum and maintained by the Block Island Southeast Light Foundation. Tourists flock to Block Island for its beaches, trails, and charming downtown, but many also come seeking the supernatural. The lighthouse is now a focal point for paranormal tourism, especially during October's haunted island events. Guided night tours, paranormal investigations, and storytelling sessions bring thousands of visitors annually. This economic revitalization has ensured that the lighthouse not only survives, but thrives as both a historic landmark and haunted relic. The Block Island Lighthouse stands as a symbol of human determination in the face of nature's fury. It has saved lives, borne witness to tragedy, and perhaps even become a conduit for the spirits of those lost at sea. Whether one believes in ghosts or not, the stories told through its stone walls and windswept bluffs continue to captivate the imagination. In this way, the lighthouse is more than a navigational aid. It is a keeper of memory, mystery, and the ever-present past.